everyone is but a breath, even those who seem secure. Surely everyone goes around like a mere phantom. In vain they rush about, heaping up wealth, without knowing whose it will finally be. But now, Lord, what do I look for? My hope is in you. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream.
Hello. Welcome to today's event. Please do carry on getting your sandwiches, eating your sandwiches, and thank you very much for coming. I'm Naomi, a second-year linguistics student at Jesus, and I'll be hosting today's event. I assume you're here because you know what it's on, and today the topic is there hope for an anxious generation? This is one of the lunchtime talks as part of Events Week, which is a week of talks and meals and times together run by the Christian Union on the theme of fulfillment. Today's topic might be a bit difficult for some people, and so do feel free to go outside, take a moment, or just take a while to yourselves. Steve Midgeley is going to come and speak to us today, so I thought it would be good to get him up and get to know him a little bit.
Thank you, Naomi.
Hello, Steve. Would you like to tell everyone who you are and what do you do?
Lovely to be with you this lunchtime. I've been living here in Cambridge for, 25 years now, long time. For a long time was the senior minister of the church up the top of Maid's Causeway, but finished up with that 3 years ago.
Great. And what do you do now with your time?
I've moved over to work for a charity called Biblical Counselling UK, which really tries to think how the Christian faith does speak into some of the struggles and difficulties that all of us get to face in our lives. Doing that now.
Great. Thank you very much for coming to speak to us. I will leave you to it.
Great. Thank you, Naomi. As Naomi was saying, I'm conscious that today is a tender subject, I guess, potentially, for some of us. Maybe either because of your own struggles with anxieties or people that are close to you who battle in this area. And I'm also conscious that we've got a little slice of time, sort of 20 minutes for me to throw some things in your direction. And I'm nervous lest in trying to get through things quickly, I kind of speak too fast about things that deserve more time and feel weighty for you. So forgive me if I do that. I'll do my best not to. I'm conscious that struggles with anxiety can be huge. I think about a woman with obsessive compulsive disorder for whom the terrors of harm that she might have caused to others left her just wrenched with anxieties and fear. Or think about a young man with an anxious depression whose fears and worries and sense of despair just escalated deeper and deeper. These are weighty things for many people. But let's backtrack for a moment and think, how do we understand anxiety? There's lots of words that we might use to describe the experience. They're all sort of overlapping terms which capture something of this experience, which immediately helps us to see that anxiety is not a one-size-fits-all kind of experience for people. It varies from mild anxiety to incredibly severe, from focused to generalized, from inconvenient to incapacitating. And in the realm of mental health, which was my background when I was working and training in psychiatry, we have all sorts of labels that are applied to try and describe some of the different experiences of anxiety that people have. But come at this another way and think of the way in which anxiety is related to the experience of arousal, of how kind of up for things we are. And many of you will be familiar with this sort of bell-shaped curve, which relates our level of arousal with performance. And you get this when our levels of arousal are very low. Maybe we've just had some lunch and it's the early afternoon and it's a nice warm building and you just begin to drift off and there's somebody droning on at the front and you're not really that interested. You know, it's hard to stay focused. But on the other hand, push arousal to the other end of the extreme, very high arousal, again, performance begins to drop off. And you get this if you're a performer, you're a musician, or maybe you play a sport. You know, you need to be up for it to perform well, but if you're too kind of het up, then your performance isn't going to be good either. And of course, today we're thinking about the right-hand side of this graph, when anxiety begins to get in the way and cause problems for us. And a whole range of problems are created when anxiety begins to peak. It's obviously a sort of a mental phenomenon, a sense of worry, restlessness, feeling keyed up or on edge. And that experience of mental angst, as it were, is a very physical experience, has sort of bodily manifestations, you know, from mildly sort of butterflies in your stomach to gut-wrenching terror. Skin problems are all associated. And of course, anxiety creates problems for us in our relationships and in our work life. It's also on the rise. In 2023, 20% of adults in the UK reported feeling anxious most or all of the time. And the highest levels of anxiety were reported amongst those in the 16 to 29 age bracket. There was a particular spike, as many of you will probably know, around the onset of the pandemic, with a rise in anxiety at that point, which hasn't quite settled back down. It was actually a rise that was on the background of a gradual increase in anxiety across the spectrum. And the latest figures on the scale that you're seeing on the screen now are up to 4 measured in 2025. That's self-report of how anxious someone describes themselves as being the day before. So something's going on in our society with a gradual rise. Why? Well, it's unlikely to be one single cause. Probably there are multiple things at play. But many of you may have come across Jonathan Haidt's book, which describes the anxious generation, and he's particularly focusing in on the way that digital media, and particularly the smartphone, in his estimation, has a big role to play in anxiety among people in their teens and 20s in particular. No time for us to explore the arguments that he makes in his book. You can come back at them in Q&A if you want to. Our focus this lunchtime, I guess, is to ask, does the Christian faith have anything to speak into the experience of anxiety? And I thought, let me try and come at it this way. First, by thinking about some of the things that go on when we are experiencing anxiety. Because when we're anxious, we worry about all kinds of stuff, don't we? We certainly worry about the future, which is captured by the what if type of question. You know, what if I get sick? What if I fail my exams? What if our project fails? What if my application for that job doesn't work out? What if? In anxiety, we roll through all sorts of future possibilities and anticipate catastrophe. Anticipate disasters coming around the corner at every turn. That's a typical phenomenon of anxiety. Somebody said that the reason that we're all so tired today is because by the time we get to the age of 30, we've lived 1,000 lives. Only one of them in reality, and the other 999 in our heads. None of which came to pass, but we did all the worrying associated with them. Maybe you think that's an exaggerated version of it, but you get the idea. We project into the future, and we do that what if anxiety about what might happen. Closely related to worries about the future are worries about control. And here, I guess, the question is, how can I? Am I able? Can I be sure that things will be all right? Can I be sure that I didn't do something terrible? Can I be sure that X will happen or Y won't happen? We worry that we won't be able to control the future, that somehow we ought to be able to take control of our lives, and we have this sense that we're not able to do so. And that causes us to fret and to worry, to end up with fear or dread. It's a common feature in obsessive compulsive disorder, where there's lots of worry about needing to control things, needing to make sure that things are all right. And that's a prominent element within that particular expression of anxiety. And then finally, we might think about the way that we worry about performance. Here, I guess the question would be, am I? Am I good enough? Am I clever enough? Am I popular enough? Am I persistent enough? Am I working hard enough? Am I applying myself carefully enough? And all too often in that am I kind of question, we're gazing sideways. We're doing that comparison thing. And here would be part of Jonathan Haidt's arguments about social media and the digital world, which gives us lots of opportunities to gaze sideways at people who seem to be doing phenomenally well, because we're all in the habit of putting our best bits on social media, so the comparison is always against the most excellent around us. And how do I compare? Am I doing well enough compared to them? Anxiety of all of these kinds, well, it hurts. It can be paralyzing to a person, can suck the lifeblood out of us. Hard to overemphasize the degree to which anxiety creates problems for us. So is there any hope? That's the title that we had for today. Is there any hope for an anxious generation? Well, yeah, loads. There's loads of hope. There's loads of different ways at coming at the struggle with anxiety and trying to make some progress with it. But the particular angle that we're thinking about today clearly is there anything within the Christian faith? Is there anything in the way of a Christian worldview that speaks into these things? Well, yes, Jesus had plenty, funnily enough, to say about worry and anxiety. And it seems to me the obvious way to just give you some first thoughts on this would be to read some of his words. So let me take a section from one of the accounts of his life in the Bible, Luke's account, and just read you a few verses about what he has to say about the issue of worry and anxiety. He said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap, they have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? If then you're not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried, for all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." Striking words in relation to the experience of anxiety and worry. Let me briefly, as we close, relate them to the three issues that I flagged up earlier on. First, think about worries concerning the future, the what-if worries. Here, I think Jesus is helping us to see how much greater our worry is when we feel on our own. All of us know that. If you're isolated and there's no one with you in the midst of your worry, it's magnified. It all too easily spirals out of control in our heads when we're left isolated with our fears and worries. probably not many of you are into existential philosophy, but maybe some of you are. But there's a therapy that spills out of existential philosophy called existential therapy, which kind of says, that the way to come to terms with life is to realize that life is meaningless, that there is no possibility truly of ever really knowing another person, so that you are finally, fundamentally, utterly alone, because no one can ever really know somebody else truly. And the task of the existential therapist is to help a person in the light of their meaningless and the lack of anything beyond death and their final ultimate aloneness, to make a go of life. As it were, to say that despite all of that, I will find and establish some meaning of my own in the midst of that. It's a pretty bleak way of going about life, truth be told. And you can see that it couldn't be more in contrast with what Jesus is driving at here. See, Jesus sees in creation evidence of a creator, in the provision of food for birds and the beauty of flowers. And on that basis urges his hearers to know that heaven is not empty, that far from being, as it were, spiritual orphans, utterly bereft of any creator, that there is a Heavenly Father. A Heavenly Father who both created us and cares for us. Jesus is working here with a kind of how much more argument. If this is what God does for birds and for flowers of the field, which are here today, gone tomorrow, how much more would he care for you? It makes a difference to our fears, doesn't it, if we know that we're not alone? But how much more would it matter to us in our fears if we knew that the one who was with us is the Creator, is the maker of the universe, is the one of ultimate power? That's the essence of Christian belief, clearly, to believe in such a God. But then one of the things I love about what Jesus is doing here is that, having bigged us up in that way by saying, look, you matter to God, he then immediately pulls us back down to size, which speaks into this second heading. You see, at the end of the first paragraph, which of you, he asks, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? If you're not able to do a small thing as that, why are you anxious all about all the rest? And I just love this from Jesus, because he's basically saying, get yourself in proportion. Remember who you are and who you're not. Remember what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. See, remember this bit of anxiety is all about imagining that we need to be in control of things, imagining that we can organize things so that bad things don't happen. And of course, to some extent, that's true, but not ultimately. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen later today. You don't actually know what's going to happen this lunchtime. Not really. I mean, you hope that the talk's going to finish soon and you're not going to be late for your next thing, but you don't know because you're not in control. I could just keep going, couldn't I? And when we do all of that, worrying, we overreach. We try to take control of things that actually aren't within our control. And when we overreach like that, when we try to be who we're not, anxiety follows, because we're trying to take a place that doesn't belong to us. And actually in the Bible, that overreaching is understood to be at the very heart of the human problem. Trying to be somebody we're not because we lose sight of God who is. He does know all things, we don't. He can be in all places, we can't. He is capable of doing anything and we're not. But again and again, we sort of push in that direction. And when we overreach, anxiety follows. And then finally, notice how this section ends. With people who are seeking and striving. And that ties in with the final question, which is, am I? Am I good enough, clever enough, smart enough, brave enough? Am I? It's intriguing to me how often the Christian faith is misunderstood. People imagine the Christian faith is all about earning favour with God. keeping rules, doing good, being religious, all in an effort to somehow get in God's good books. But it misses the mark entirely. You see what Jesus says here? Fear not, little flock, it's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. At the heart of the Christian faith is grace, the undeserved favour, gift. Not about earning anything, but about just being on the receipt of blessing undeserved. Now, suppose a person knows this. I mean, really knew it. At the core of their being, were utterly certain that on this whole performance business, well, it was over and done with. Because in God's view, they were okay. Because he gave them life. He gave them right standing with himself. They knew already that they were valued and beloved by their Creator. Not because they'd reached a certain standard, but just because he loves. It's actually what we all long for. There's nothing better, is there, than to have somebody who knows you through and through, knows everything about you, knows the worst about you, and still loves you. That's what we crave, isn't it? That's the kind of relationship that we all long for. What the Christian faith says is that at the heart of the gospel message, the heart of the Christian message, is that God loves in that way. Please don't mishear me as we wrap up. I would hate you to hear me suggest that because this is what the Christian faith has for us, that every Christian is a shining example of calm-free, anxiety-absent life. We're not. I'm not. We're all works in progress. And some of us started a long way back in the business of grasping how this Christian faith changes our relationship with anxiety. But do I believe that these things have the capacity, and have I seen the way that these things bring transformation in some of the very worst examples of anxiety? Yeah, that's what a lot of my work is all about. That is our very real hope for an anxious generation. I think at this stage it's over to you. I don't know if Naomi's going to come back. I threw a couple of questions. Is this an anxious generation? Do you believe that? Is that your experience of it? Does Jesus' wisdom that we've looked at, does it help? Does it make sense to you? So I think time for you to think about that round tables. I don't know, Naomi, you're going to say any more about that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve, for helping us think about that. Do take some time to discuss these things on your tables. There'll be about 10 minutes now to chat, discuss, get more sandwiches if you want them. There'll also be a QR code for a Slido, so you can put up your questions, and yeah, in a little while we'll do a Q&A where Steve can answer any more thoughts or questions you have about this.
pierced for my transgressions, wounded for my sins. This man of sorrows came to take my place. King over creation, slain for my salvation, unspeakable love, abounding grace. Now I am coming to this holy place. I am drawing near to seek your face. Jesus, your blood has made my hands clean, so I will not hide my face from you. Jesus, your blood has made my hands clean, so I will not hide my face from you. You have won the victory, you have paid the cost. While I was still in sin, you died for me. Carrying my sorrows and lifting off my shame, bearing all my sin to set me free. Now I am coming to this holy place. I am drawing near to seek your face. 'Cause Jesus, your blood has made my hands clean, so I will not hide my face from you. Jesus, your blood has made my hands clean, so I will not hide my face from you.
Hello. I will draw us back together. And yeah, Steve is going to answer some of your questions now. So we'll start with the top voted question, which is, how do you apply the part where it says that God will provide for you when things seem to be going wrong? How do we stop from being anxious then?
Yeah, good question. I think clearly what Jesus is saying in this section does not mean that he thinks bad things never happen to people. He is more than aware that awful things take place and that people live through them, and awful things took place in his own life. So I don't think Jesus is saying that there is a guarantee of nothing bad ever happening. But I think he is saying it makes the world of difference, even in the bad places, to know that there is a Heavenly Father who has plans and purposes, even if those plans and purposes may not be transparent to us. The Bible's big on that notion. You may be familiar with the Old Testament character Job, to whom terrible things happened, and his great puzzle was, why are these awful things taking place? And the whole book is a kind of exploration of how to make sense of suffering that seems to be meaningless. So there's, do we still worry when difficult things are taking place? Yeah, of course we do. I think what I'm wanting to suggest is that it makes a difference to know that God is in the frame within that understanding that we have.
Thank you. Yeah, the next question is, was Jesus anxious?
I meant to say also, if I answered any of these questions in a way that misses the point, if you were the person who answered the question, or you think I've missed the point anyway, please feel free to yell out and ask me to come at it a different way. So I'm very relaxed with that. Was Jesus anxious? Well, I guess most famously, you would think about what happened immediately before he went to the cross and was crucified. And again, I don't want to assume you may or may not have some of these bits of the Christian story in your mind, but there's a time when he's in a garden called the Garden of Gethsemane, where he is tussling with the plan that his Father has for him to go to the cross and die, knowing the agonies that is going to involve, and he wrestles in that moment. Father, if it's possible, take this from me. But if it's not possible, let your will be done. I don't know, do you call that anxiety? Do you call it an anticipation of something that is going to be incredibly difficult? I don't think that to be free of anxiety means to disappear into some sort of an out-of-body experience that means that you're unaware of hard things. I think the next question, just remind me what the next question is, because it might, I don't get ahead of myself and answer the next one.
The question is anxiety a failure to trust God? Yeah,
okay, so I saw those two questions and I thought actually these two just do kind of go together. I think in some ways, one way of thinking about this would be, do we worry about the right things or the wrong things? Because there are various places in the New Testament that suggest that some of the first leaders of the Christian faith, the Apostle Paul, wrote a lot of the letters in the New Testament, but he describes anxieties that he has, worries that he has for the churches that he's beginning to establish. So it seems to me that there are things worth worrying about, and things that we shouldn't be worrying about. And sometimes we get those topsy-turvy, and the things that ought to have a prominence of importance to us get neglected, and things that really are not as important as we think they are rise up and become over-important to us. And I think a Christian perspective would be thinking, what really does matter? What things are worth stressing about, if I can put it like that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the next question is, what's the line between giving up our worries and being naive?
Well, I'm starting to sound like a stuck record now. I guess it's in the same territory, isn't it? Isn't that the way that we would see it? That I mean, I cast that idea of anxiety being, kind of future orientated, worrying about, what if this happens, what if that happens, is the picture of somebody who's not anxious, somebody who doesn't do any thinking about the future, doesn't prepare in any way for stuff that they know is coming down the track. No, absolutely not. You do anticipate things that are coming at you, situations that might arise. Again, I think what I'm trying to capture and sort of suggest to you is that is transformed with an awareness that you're not on your own in that. That there is a God that you can be in relationship with, who helps to set your priorities, helps you to work out the things that matter and the things that don't matter, and to whom you can turn to seek his help. And there are famous verses in the New Testament about, don't be anxious, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Again, there would be the Christian experience of saying, I have somebody to speak to. I'm not in that sort of existential sense alone.
Thank you. The next question is a little bit more practical. It says, how did you empathize and treat patients who have different worldviews and don't believe that Jesus is in control?
My psychiatry is a long time ago now. I told you I was a church pastor for over 20 years, so it's back in the dim, distant past. But I loved working in psychiatry and felt a great burden for people as they suffered and struggled with incredibly difficult things. I don't think it's hard to empathise when you see people in pain, when you see people who are wrestling with what I think are some of the hardest experiences of a person can face. The anguish of a deep depression, the impact of intense anxiety. These are terrible things, and so it's not hard to empathise with somebody who's struggling like that, whoever they are. So that was not a hard thing. Is part of the reason that I ended up coming out of psychiatry and into working as a church pastor, because of my conviction that there is an ultimate answer to some of our greatest life problems to be found in Christ, and working within the NHS within psychiatry was not the place that I could be presenting Christ to other people. Yeah, I guess it was. It was connected with that. So yeah, no, it wasn't hard to empathise.
Next is trusting that God is in control just a convenient solution?
Yes, if you extract the word just, or replace convenient with glorious. There's a what's that funny quote? I can't remember now who said it. Somebody who's cleverer than me will remember it. I think it was probably C.S. Lewis, who made the point that when I find that I have a desire for something that isn't fulfilled, it may be that I was made for something that I haven't yet realized. I haven't quoted that very well at all. Someone will be able to quote it slightly better than me. The point that he's trying to make is, when I find that something makes sense of my life, one way of thinking about it is I've just made it up to keep myself happy. Another way of thinking about it is I've hit the thing that is really true. And that's why it makes sense. That's why I want this thing so badly to be true. Because actually it is true. This is what life is actually all about. I mean, it would be a funny thing, wouldn't it, if discovering that there is a God in control of things didn't seem like a really good thing, if it's true. So you'd want it to be gloriously convenient for us.
This might be the final question because of time, but would you be able to answer, does this mean that we should be able to just think or reason our way out of feeling anxious?
No. Do you want a longer answer? Should we go for a longer answer than that one? Does it mean we should? I mean, well, yes and no. Do I think that the things I've tried to capture, albeit in a short space of time, do have the capacity to make a really big impact upon us? Yes. But I think they do it not through reason, but through relationship. So that at the heart of the Christian faith is not some ideas, not a few sort of items on a checklist to believe in and sign up to, but the recognition of entering into a relationship with Christ. I was saying to Naomi, it's a funny experience for me that I realised that it is just coming up to exactly 45 years since I became a Christian, and I was sat up there at a talk on a Friday night 45 years ago plus 2 days, and then went back to a friend's room who'd brought me to the event, and he said to me, "Do you want to become a Christian?" And I thought at that stage, I'd been thinking about stuff for several months and puzzling it all through, and I thought, well, I was kind of rather reluctantly, because I was a sort of stubborn, arrogant young man arguing all the time, I was sort of very reluctantly thinking, I think I've run out of arguments against this Christian faith thing. But he could see that there was another step, which was a decision of the will to, as it were, to enter into a relationship with Christ, to engage with him personally. And that was the step that I hadn't taken, and that he helped me to see that, so I took it that night. Sorry, that's a long way round of answering the question, do we reason our way out of being anxious? No, I think we relate our way out of being anxious. It's the discovery that there is within the Christian faith a relationship with Jesus that is personal, that is real, that involves him dwelling in us by his Spirit, and that transforms everything.
Thank you very much. Thank you for asking lots of questions, and Steve, thank you for answering them. If you submitted a question that didn't get answered, I'm sure Steve would love to talk about that with you, so he'll be around, so do come and ask him those questions. And if you have a question that you didn't submit, still come and ask Steve about that. That is the formal end to this talk, but the church building will be open for another few hours if you'd like to stick around, chat, discuss what you've heard, to study. Just use this space. There's also a bookstall near the back. Do have a look, take a book. There are resources there for that. There are a few other things to point you towards. One of them is the International Dinner, which is happening St Andrew the Great Church at 5:30, and then there's a talk at 7:30 tonight about fulfilling our desire for purpose here. Thank you very much for coming.